All right, folks. Hey, this is Jackie Luqman, and this is obviously a special-ish edition of Live and Coffee, Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation. This weekend's protests have been intense, and there is a lot going on, and I believe there is a lot more to come. And forgive the choppy video and maybe some of the audio, but I'm just kind of enjoying a few minutes of relaxation after a pretty busy weekend, kind of doing meetings with some organizations that I'm involved in, and preparing rapid response steps for folks who are going to be out in the streets. There's a lot going on, y'all, and there is a lot to talk about. I'm not going to be able to talk about it all tonight. It is going to be impossible to do that, but I do want to touch on a few things that I have encountered in just the 2 or 3 days that I have been online and paying attention to what people are posting, what people are saying. Sorry, I keep moving the camera around because the angle is weird. I'm outside in the back of the house, and I've got the radio on and trying to just enjoy a little bit of relaxation in these really anxious times, and the time should be anxious. We should be nervous and wary of the unrest that's going on right now, but it shouldn't be a surprise. And I'm not saying that we should be nervous and wary because we should be afraid. I don't think we should be afraid. As an organizer, as a Black woman, as somebody who understands history, we told you that this was coming. We didn't know when. I have to admit, I wasn't expecting it this soon, but I was expecting it because there was no way that this system could continue to oppress Black people, poor people, Latinos, Native people, and there not be a response. And I think that obvious coronavirus played a part in this response because now, we're looking at the makeup of the demographics of the protests. We see a lot of white people out there in these protests, and that's great because it's the solidarity that we need. But let me explain to you, I think, why that's happening. Aside from, the issues of systemic racism being more widely explained or the information being more widely available to more people, there's been a lot of anti-racist work that has been done by some white people, and I think all of that is kind of paying off, I guess, for lack of a better term, in we're seeing the number of young white people out there on the front lines with our folks. But the other reason this is happening is because of coronavirus and the inequality that the younger generation of working class white people are themselves experiencing. There was no way for people not to notice, not to see, not to be real clear in the way this government responded to this coronavirus pandemic. There was no way people couldn't know that this government doesn't give a damn about you. This government doesn't give a damn about you either. So people who thought that Black people were exaggerating, people who thought that maybe Latinos were exaggerating, people who thought that Native Americans were exaggerating, that queer people were exaggerating, that trans people were exaggerating, that disabled people were exaggerating, that poor people were exaggerating. Well, now we were telling the truth. The government does not care about this system in this country, doesn't care about you. The system of capitalism is an exploitative, anti-humanity system. And the people who benefit from the system and who prop it up know this. So, that's a whole nother conversation, how this government has showed the true nature of capitalism, ripped the whole facade off. And now we all see what capitalism really is in this country. But for real, y'all, just the people who are out here, um, the young folks are out here in solidarity with Black people, because along with this capitalist system being exposed, it is impossible. It is absolutely impossible not to see the systemic racism that is at the root of this system. And understand, people are not out here protesting Floyd. Please be clear about that. People are also out here protesting for all of the other people whose names we don't even know, who have been killed and assaulted by law enforcement. And those law enforcement officers have gotten away with it, not just in Minneapolis, but in every city across this country. We don't even really know the true scope of extrajudicial police killings and the police abuse, because most police departments in this country do not report data to the federal government, to the FBI, to anybody on officer involved shootings. It's all voluntary. Nobody requires them to do it, so most don't. So when we have been saying all this time that this is a problem that's not only centuries long, centuries old, but it's much bigger and it's much worse than most people think it is. It's much bigger than the hashtags we see on social media, because so much of what happens is not actually caught on anybody's camera. We weren't kidding. So I think for a lot of people, those truths are being exposed. And you know what? Thank God for that. But let me be clear about something. There's still a whole bunch of folks and a whole bunch of progressives who, honestly, amid everything that's going on, it really getting on my nerves, the kinds of things that I'm seeing. And it just kind of carries over from what we experienced in 2015 and 16, dealing with some white progressives who believed that they could align with the alt-right to get Medicare for all passed. See, this is why you don't do that. All right. And I know people were like, oh my God, she will never let that go. No. But see, this is why we can never this is why we could never let that issue go. With all of these white progressives talking about they would work with members of the alt-right if they wanted Medicare for all too. Because at the alt-right and right-wing white supremacists want Medicare for all, they still want to kill us. They still want to get rid of and oppress us. And there were some white progressives who were fine with that, and there was no amount of telling them that they were wrong that Black progressives and Black leftists could do without being on the receiving end of the very racist vitriol of these people's supporters. There were some Black progressives who defended these folks and tried to make excuses for these people, and I don't talk to these people to this day, because I understood where it would lead. It would lead to this moment where we are right now. Some of these people, some of these white progressives who talked so much about aligning with the alt-right in order to get Medicare for all, how are you going to be out on the streets with us, fighting for our lives and fighting for our rights and fighting for justice, when just 5 years ago, you were talking about you would work with somebody like Mike Chernovich, a rape apologizing racist, in order for you to get Medicare for all? How could we ever trust you to be on the front lines in this moment with us, remembering what you said and did and advocated for back then? We can't. And now what is happening because of those people um, is that some of those folks are now propagating some of the most messed up. They're not even. I'm not even going to call them conspiracy theories because they're not theories. They're just narratives that the media is putting out to discredit the legitimate rage of oppressed people. That, again, I can't help but saying it again over and over again, that we told you was happening. It was coming. It honestly came sooner than I thought. But I think, like I said when I started, I think that coronavirus sped the revolution up, because coronavirus exposed what this system really is and all of its contradictions. So that most people who are honest with themselves and who are open to being uh, um, educated couldn't help but say, damn, they were right. And that's why you see so many people out on the streets, not right now, the multiracial coalition in this uprising right now. That's why you see the coalition you have out here right now. But some of the things that people are repeating, and some of these white progressives, y'all kind of get on my nerves, because we have spent all this time in the past 5, 6, I don't know, 10 years being online, educating folks on the history of Black oppression and Black repression politically, and using law enforcement and the narratives that come out of the power structure that are used to delegitimize Black protest and dissent. Russiagate was one of those narratives. We explained until we were damn near blue in the face why the media saying that Black people were convinced not to vote by some memes on social media that came out of some Russian troll farm was not only absolutely blatantly ridiculous, but it was also racist and based in a long history of using communism or the smearing Black activists as communists and align with Russia, going back to Paul Robeson and Marcus Garvey and Black people before them and since. Martin Luther King Jr. was smeared as a communist. And we just explain this stuff till we're blue in the face to some of y'all. Why not to trust the media about the narratives that they put out, the corporate media, about the narratives they put out about Black people, and especially Black dissent in particular. And then here we are in the middle, at the start, at what I believe is the start of this what I hope is a revolution. And some of y'all are out here propagating this stuff about Russia is behind the violence in these protests. Russians are instigating the violence. Somebody, I think it was the Secretary of Defense or the National Security Advisor, that's who it was, who said that. And you got Joy Reid, and that came from the governor of Missouri, who is a Democrat, I think. The governor, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but the governor of Missouri said a few nights ago that everybody who was arrested in Missouri was out of town, and there was evidence of foreign influence. That mug had no evidence of that at all. That was just something that he literally pulled out of his ass. He claimed he was told that by Homeland Security or something. A few hours later, the Hennepin County Police Department, which is in Missouri where the protests are happening, released the statistics of all the arrests. Almost everybody was local. Almost everybody that was arrested was local, but it took no time whatsoever for Joy Reid to get on Twitter and propagate that lie. Now you've got some progressives talking about, oh my God, there's outside influence in these protests causing the riots. It's outside agitators. First of all, the whole idea that people are condemning looting, after all of the history that we told you about how this country was built on the looting of the settler colonists and the wealth they built off of looting from the continent of literally looting us. from the continent of Africa, looting resources from other people, the property destruction that they committed, the settler colonists committed in amassing their wealth and expanding and growing the power of this country. Today is the anniversary of the bombing of Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now you got people online, these white progressives, oh my God, looting and rioting is not the way to do it. Looting and rioting successful Black neighborhoods in the 1919s and the 1920s and through half of the first half of the 1900s is the history of this country. It's the history of white people in power in this country. But you got white progressives on here talking about mad because Target got looted. I don't give a fuck about Target. Target is a corporation that qualified for the government's paycheck protection program. They're not gonna miss a dime of whatever was taken from that store. And those people that were looting, listen, it's not that I am going to say that there are not some people who are agents and provocateurs and who are agent provocateurs. But let me tell you who those people usually are. They're usually cops. They're usually cops right there in that city. There is a documented history of this happening to all Black protests, all Black movements. This is what they do, and there might be a few white supremacists out there doing this kind of thing too, might be, but to continue this narrative that all of the anger and rage is being manipulated by outside agitators and white people, that takes away the agency of the people who are out there struggling against this system. Now, I don't believe that any of the property that was damaged was accidental. Because when let's talk about some of the looting, okay? People were all pissed off about Target. Oh my God, think about the Targets. The stuff that was taken from the Targets was distributed to the communities. There's video of that. There is a video that a friend of mine took on his page after there was reports of looting in a shopping mall near him. And he went to the shopping mall and he said, well, the only evidence I see is the big box stores. There was a little bit of damage there, but the independent shops, the small businesses, there was no damage to that. And let's talk about this whole narrative about fixating on property damage and, this isn't the right way to do it. Well, first of all, what's the right way to do it? Huh? What's the right way to protest? Because every single way we have done before, white people ain't like it. And even some white progressives. I remember having conversations with some white progressives about how Colin Kaepernick's kneeling was not the right way to do it. You ain't like kneeling. You didn't like praying. You didn't like Martin Luther King Jr. marching. And some of y'all are passing around this meme of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King leading a protest. And, with that picture at the top and the picture at the bottom is of, some property damage going on at a protest, saying, this is a protest, this is a riot at the bottom. But y'all don't ever post the picture about what happened to the King Jr. and the rest of those protesters just a few minutes after that picture was taken. You know what happened to them? Their asses were beaten by law enforcement. Dogs were let loose on. So stop sharing that shit. Stop sharing that protest action shit. To what we went through. Because you're trying to image for our same struggle today. So people are posting saying that things are popping off at the White House right now. There may be something going on not too far from where I am. I'm, going to take this time to prepare some safety packages for some for the folks in the organization, a couple of organizations I belong to. And I'm just going to be honest with y'all. I'm 53 years old. I'll be 53 in October. I'm also hypertensive, so I need to be very careful. And we're still in the middle of this coronavirus, so I have to be real careful about putting myself in a situation where I have to have a mask. I might be in tear gas and I need to take the mask off and I'm being around a whole bunch of people. We have to be practical. And let's just be real. I'm just going to be real. I'm going to tell you the same thing that I told a couple of organizations I belong to. I will be out there, but first couple of days, the youth are going to lead us. I absolutely believe that. As an elder, I cede my position on the front lines to let the youth lead. Hey, Brewski. No, come here. Come here. Brewski doesn't like the dog next door, y'all. Brewski. So I'm cool with ceding my position on the front lines. I've been on the front lines plenty of time to the youth. I'm cool with doing it. And I'm not doing that because I'm afraid. I'm doing that because every revolution needs to be led by the youth. And some of us elders need to be humble and let the youth lead. I will provide support, logistics, will be a resource. I'll come get you if you need me to. Yeah, absolutely. But the youth need to lead. So back to some of y'all white progressives. Aside from the protest shaming that needs to stop, this whole obsession with outside agitators. Why won't y'all just let us have our agency and let us have our rage? And if you don't agree with it, I'm not telling you have to be cool with property damage, but for real, property damage? How are you more angry about property being damaged than you are about the lives that have been damaged by the ongoing systemic oppression, the economic oppression, and the outright taking of lives, the extrajudicial killings? People, Black people, brown people, Native people, the disabled, queer people. How are you angrier about that property damage than you are about the long history of police abuse that people have suffered under? Do you understand that in Minnesota alone, the reason people responded the way they did in Minnesota is because the Minneapolis Police Department has an obscene history of police abuse. Two of the cops who were involved in the murder of George Floyd themselves had, between the two of them, over 20 accusations of abuse, and both of them were involved in police-involved killings before. Hey, come here. Sit down. Sit. Yeah, he doesn't like it because he wants to be over there. He wants to fuss at the dog. So we're talking about a people in every city. In every city, there is a protest in this country. I can almost guarantee you the people are protesting not just against the latest Black person, not just because of George Floyd, but because there has been a history of police abuse in that city. I bet you when it's all said and done, all of that is going to come out. Now, I know this is my life, y'all. This is our life. He's such a bully, but he's such a big old baby. But so the people in Minneapolis have been living with this abusive police department. What's his name? I hate to say his name. The cop who was kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck. I don't ever want to say that man's name. But the cop who was kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck was involved in the killing of, I believe, an indigenous woman. that he was not prosecuted for. And you know who didn't prosecute him? Amy Klobuchar. So then you want people to vote for folks who would choose those kind of people as as the vice president? Those are the kind of people you want to make. Then you're going to vote shame people. You're going to vote shame people for not wanting to vote for a presidential candidate. Excuse me. Who would choose someone who let killer cops off while she was prosecuted. That is ridiculous. Hold on for just a second, y'all. I just got a message and I need to respond to it. All right, so that's why what happened in Minneapolis happened the way it did. It wasn't just because of George Floyd. It's because of so many more incidents before George Floyd that were like it. We talked to Eugene Puryear today on the show on By Any Means Necessary, and Eugene told us about a story of the Minneapolis Police Department killing a young brother in Minneapolis and throwing his body in a dumpster. Nobody ever heard about that. Nobody, there's no hashtag for him because it wasn't recorded on anybody's phone. There's no video of it. How can you imagine how much this happens? And this is what we have been trying to convey to people for years, decades. So, that's why Minneapolis exploded the way it did. And that's why there are all these protests across the country. Because this is just one incident. This is the last straw in a string of incidents spanning over decades, centuries, actually, when you look at the history of this country. But then you've got people who are parroting this narrative about outside agitators coming in and compelling people to violence. First, okay, just the whole thing about property damage being conflated with violence is just deeply obscene to me, especially in the context of people who are struggling against an oppressive, racist, white supremacist law enforcement apparatus that kills people without accountability. That's violence. That's violence. The denial of equal access to opportunity, resources, the continued segregation of Black people into segregated neighborhoods, schools, continued racism on our jobs, the racism in the healthcare system, the racism that we experience in the fire system, just the systemic racism that we endure, even if we got a little bit of money over breakfast money. We still experience racism. That's violence. That is violence. Property damage is property damage. But in a capitalist society, property is prioritized over people. So this is why the corporate, this outrage over property damage. And by the way, this is not new. Every uprising, every Black people have, and somebody's stuff got broke, it was always, oh my God, the Negroes are destroying violence. But the history of organized violence by white mobs, by the government, law enforcement, and even participated in by law enforcement and the so-called justice system colluding to exonerate those who commit the violence against us, the property damage that has been committed against us, and the destruction of our independent, sovereign, successful towns like Rosewood, like Greenwood, like Elaine, Texas, A, where has ever been the outrage about that? And if you were going to say, well, that was 100 years in Philadelphia, where the police not only dropped the bomb on a house on Osage Avenue, where the MOVE organization lived, they let the entire block burn down. Where's the outrage for the property damage committed against our people that the government perpetuates continually? How about asset forfeiture laws, where if you're suspected of some kind of crime, cops can come and take your shit? Didn't the Supreme Court just rule that the cops can still do that? If they pull you over and they suspect you of committing some crime, they can still seize your property and you will never get it back. Even if you are ultimately exonerated, not found guilty of anything, you ain't getting your stuff back. How come there's no outrage about that? That disproportionately happens to black people. But you got so-called progressives wailing and moaning, oh my God, looting and rioting isn't the way to do it. I go back to my question that I asked a few minutes ago. Which way do you want? Which was to demand justice in this country because you didn't support us in every other way we asked. We asked nicely, we sang. And we sang at the same time. We kneeled, you didn't like that. Sang songs, didn't like it. Created videos about the problem that were catchy. Danced and sang for you, didn't like that. Did movies, didn't like the movies. They hurt your feelings. Wrote books, didn't like the books. The books hurt your feelings. Talked about the history, don't like that. That hurts your feelings. We talk about the history of white violence against black bodies and against black property that has not gone addressed. And we get called, we hate white. Somebody just said that to me today. we have that because we talking about hurt your feelings. And I see the notification coming up on my phone that Trump is speaking out on the protest. I don't even want to know what he has to say because I know it's going to be terrible. But see, we know what Trump is going to say. It's shocking to me how ridiculous some of y'all's friends, and some of your friends on this might not even be progressive. I'm just assuming that they're progressive because they're your friends. Maybe that's my mistake. Because from what it looks like to me, some of y'all friends are just straight out racist. You keep having them around. You keep them around like that's somehow a good thing. And I'm kind of side and understand these people out here, their rights, but yours too. Because trust me, this system that is out there crushing dissent and protest of the people that you are condemning because they breaking some windows, you're next. You're next. Let's not forget whose side this system is on. Just last week, the white people were pissed off. Businesses weren't open. They stormed a Capitol building in Michigan. Just run in, got in the cops' faces. They're struggling with the cops, screaming and yelling at the cops. Nobody got shot. Nobody got arrested. There's no tear gas. There's no pepper spray. National Guard wasn't called out. None of that kind of stuff. The black legislator in Michigan had to get black folks and Latino folks who were armed to escort her to work because the law enforcement didn't offer that woman protection. Their statement was, well, she had to ask for it. Anybody should have had to ask for that. After the shots and intimidation those people showed in that Capitol building, but all that happened, all that blocking the entrances to hospitals, keeping people from being able to get to the hospital. They are harassing doctors and nurses out there kind of protesting them. They putting their hands on people. Ain't nobody getting arrested. All that happened in the past couple of weeks. No National Guard, no arrested, no tear gas, no pepper spray, no curfews. But another black person is executed on video. And black people have had a fucking enough. And the first thing out of some of y'all and your friends' mouths is, oh, I hope it remains peaceful. You think people who are treated with the utmost contempt and perpetual unending violence are going to remain peaceful? I mean, Jesus turned some tables over y'all. Jesus went into a synagogue because people were ripping off the parishioners with a whip, beat people's asses, turned some tables over, and ran the thieves and the grifters out of the synagogue. You people, some of you, won't even get offline shitting on people out here in the streets struggling against this system that you claim you want change too, but you don't want to deal with the people who are willing to get their hands dirty to change the system. That's garbage. Y'all, that's garbage. That's absolute garbage. And some of you progressives are guilty of that. And if you're not guilty of it, you know you got some people on your friends list who are guilty of it. And you're just sitting there enabling them. Now, I'm not telling you which friends you can and can't have. I am telling you that I'm looking at y'all sideways. I really am. Because now is the time where we have to decide which side we are on. Which side are we on, y'all? See, back in 2015, when we were having these discussions with white progressives, some kind of alliance, red, brown alliance, or whatever the hell they call it, with right-wing racists and the alt-right, some kind of alliance with them. People felt like they could say all kinds of stuff to us and call us racists and just treat us like all kinds of garbage because, I mean, they didn't feel threatened. Excuse me, they felt like they had the moral high ground. Oh, that's the other thing. People always talk about, and I've seen some progressives say this, oh, you give up your moral high ground when you resort to violence. So at what point have the police given up their moral high ground? Because they stay violent. I don't understand. If people who are tired of getting their asses kicked and getting their people and family killed by law enforcement and having the system let those folks off, if they lose their moral high ground because they break a window or, they appropriate some materials from some business that probably pays their workers minimum fucking wage anyway and doesn't provide them benefits. If those people lose the moral high ground, please tell me at what point law enforcement loses the moral high ground, since they're the ones doing the murdering and the system is the ones doing the letting those people off. When do they lose the moral high ground? When do the politicians who kowtow to the police unions, who spend all of the money defending killer cops and abusive cops and making sure they get off, when do they, the politicians of the Democratic and the Republican parties, when do they lose the moral high ground? Because they are cozying up with a violent system. When does the police union lose the moral high ground? When do the cops who stand by and watch their fellow officers assault, abuse, and kill people and do nothing and say nothing, when do they lose the moral high ground? And I understand there's a culture within law enforcement that punishes police officers who do want to speak out. But for real, when they gonna grow a spine? and do something different. There's all this condemnation of people who are protesting to do something different, but nobody ever has a suggestion on what that different is, because y'all know damn well we've done everything else asked of us or suggested of us to get the nation to do something about the issues that the nation created. You know that. You know that's true. So this whole thing about, oh, you lose the moral high ground when you resort to violence. No, you turn that on the system that is violent and has been violent toward us. They lose the moral high ground in telling us how to resist them. So, I mean, it is a very interesting time. The curfew here in DC is 7 p.m. tonight. So the curfew will be in a few minutes. I've got comrades out there in the streets who are, like I said, I'm going to be putting together some safety packages for them to come get. When they go out tomorrow, I'll probably go out tomorrow or the next night. White progressive better than this. Y'all really do. Y'all in this sitting online talk, oh, well, where did all these pallets of bricks come from? Oh, it's strange. All these pallets of bricks have shown up at these protest sites. You know who's putting those pallets of bricks there? The cops. The cops. And like I said, I'm not saying that there are not a few supremacists who are showing up and trying to start some shit. I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. But mostly what you're seeing is the righteous rage of an oppressed people that was going to explode because this nation, all of the elements in this nation, refused to address the long-standing issues that these people have been living under. That's what you're seeing. Oh, there was something else I can't remember what it was now. Something else that had stuck in my craw that progressives were losing their minds over. I can't remember what it was now. Hopefully it'll come back to me in a second. Oh, that's the thing. Can we please stop calling every protest with black people in it Black Lives Matter? Can we stop doing that? Black Lives Matter is not a centralized organization. Every black person at every protest is not a member of Black Lives Matter. Every protest is not Black Lives Matter. So these protests are not Black Lives Matter protests. These protests are the beginning of an uprising. These protests are the beginning of a revolution that was a long time coming. It is almost disrespectful to tie these uprisings to movement, and I'm not delegitimizing the importance of Black Lives Matter, but it's almost disrespectful to tie this uprising to a hashtag movement that was started a few years ago when we're talking about centuries of oppression that people are still dealing with. Thank you, Dylan Saavedra. You're right, Antifa. Antifa was the other thing I wanted to talk about, because y'all progressives pissing me off so bad with your hatred of Antifa. Y'all aren't even afraid of Antifa. Y'all just keep believing the stuff white people in the media and some black folks tell you about what Antifa is. Look here. Antifa means anti-fascist. Antifa is one of the few organizations of white people. Let me put it like this. Antifa got that John Brown spirit. You understand what I'm saying? Antifa is those white folks who are not afraid to be on the front lines, put their bodies on the lines, not to protect black people. Nah, because they won't kick some fascist ass too. They want to kick some racist and white supremacist ass too, because it's the right thing to do. These are the people that some of you progressives are saying that, well, no, I don't want to have anything to do with Antifa. Why? You don't want white people who hate white supremacy? You don't want white people who hate racism out here? Willing to get physical when the racists get physical with us? You don't want that? I mean, I knew some of y'all were cowards, but damn. This whole pearl clutching thing about, oh, Antifa is out there antagonizing things. Antifa is not out there antagonizing things. First of all, Antifa is not an organization either. There's not like a membership list for Antifa. And if you really want to be clear about it, Russia, the United States, Britain, and all of the Allied forces were Antifa in World War II because they were fighting against the fascism of Nazi Germany. That's true. That's where Antifa came from. So now you've got the American media demonizing Antifa, and this happened long before Trump and his ridiculous declaration that he's going to declare Antifa a terrorist organization. You cannot declare movement that is not an organization a terrorist organization. You can't. It's not. But remember, this happened during Charlottesville under the Obama administration. Progressives losing their minds. Oh, I don't agree. Well, fuck y'all then. You don't agree with white people who are willing to go toe to toe with racists with me? You don't agree with that? Not only do I need you to stay home, but I need you to shut up. If that's how you're going to be. So, this whole Antifa thing is coming up again, and I'm seeing some of the same so-called progressives and some more folks opposing Antifa. And that just, I don't know if the indication of really how stupid some people are or really how gullible some people are. But regardless of whether it's stupidity or gullibility, it's dangerous for us. Dangerous for us, because if this is how weak progressives have been, then we were right to have been suspicious of the ability of the Bernie Sanders progressive base to push him to do anything more than he said he was going to do on issues that we need addressed, like reparations. I mean, come on, let's bring it all around full circle. So many folks were mad that we were mad about Bernie Sanders and what he said about reparations. Well, if y'all gonna punk out about having white people stand with us and fight racists who are coming after us, why should we trust you to stand up for anything that's important to us? We don't. We don't. Oh, thank you, Dylan, for reminding me about what it was. So, guys, for not doing a show last night. It is obviously a very hectic weekend. Been checking on folks, been planning things, been doing some serious organizational meeting. This is the part of this whole moment that is for, and exciting is not the right word for it. I don't want people to think, we're sitting going, oh, that's not really, what it is. It is hopeful. It is anticipation that's, and that's how I feel. Of course, I don't want people to get hurt, but I understand the sacrifices are going to be made. And remember, we are in the middle of this pandemic still. And just the fact that people are out in the streets fighting against this system, fighting for better, risking their health for something better ought to tell you how serious a moment we are in. We had people last week out in the streets pissed off because they didn't want to wear a mask in Costco. They didn't want to wear a mask in Costco, and they wanted the bar to be opened up so they could have a beer. Out there risking absolutely nothing. But here our people are, Antifa and black people and Black Lives Matter and Surge and other white folks and native folks and Latino folks and gay and transgender and disabled folks out in the street struggling, risking their health, nothing better for themselves, but for something better for all of us. That is revolution. That's revolution, y'all. That is the struggle for freedom. Those people are freedom fighters. I heard that in Atlanta, being rich down the Lord Jesus, or whatever deity you worship or don't. If that's how they're going to come down, then that's how they need to come down. In Philadelphia, the statue of former mayor, just out and out, blatant white supremacist mayor and former police commissioner Frank Rizzo. Ask anybody from Philadelphia about the reputation of Frank Rizzo. And then I'm sure you're going to ask yourself why the hell there was a statue dedicated to that man in the first place, but we do got a bunch of statues dedicated to Christopher Columbus. So, I mean, people deface the statue of Frank Rizzo. Praise the Lord Jesus. Hope they go back and, existence. Look at the people that as people do out in these streets. What I am is that if you're not be out there, if you're not going to be struggling with people, save your criticism for the people who have actually done the damage to people's whole lives, generations of lives. There are businesses that have been damaged that people should have left alone. We'll help those folks out. We'll correct that. Leave it to the people. We will correct that. But ain't nobody crying over fucking Target. And don't shame people trying to. And if there are people out here in these streets protesting who don't want any part of that, then let them struggle themselves for how they handle their movement. Let the people struggle for how they struggle for freedom amongst themselves. That has to be how it's done. If you're not going to be out there in support of the people in the struggle, then honestly keep your criticism to yourself. Because all of the criticism is based on centuries of shaming oppressed people into just not challenging the system of oppression. All of this criticism is really getting people not siding with the oppressor. Oh, you saying that? Did you say that when the United States and the Bank of England looted the gold from Venezuela? Did you say that rioting is not the way to do it when the United States basically fomented a riot in Libya and implemented regime change with violence? Were you up in all violence then? Are connected. The violence in Palestine, violence in Libya, the violence in Zimbabwe, the economic situation in Venezuela and Cuba and in Iran, all tied to this imperial, settler, colonial, white supremacist system that we are struggling against in this country. That's some more conversations. That's some more discussions. Not going to get into it tonight, but it's all the same system. And as you are seeing now, not only are people around the country rising up against this system, but people around up in solidarity with us. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the threat. That's why this government that would not mobilize the National Guard or any other to respond to provide for us during the spread of the coronavirus. That's why they're quick to mobilize these forces to quell these protests, to crush dissent, to spin the narrative as if people are as if the protests are illegitimate, to take the focus off of the grievances and put the focus on property damage. Proper place, people's lives cannot. People around the world, though, are much better equipped to identify in white supremacy and colonial and the head that nations and UK early and to the world. Because see, other people have been colonized. You see, other people have a history of colonization. So they understand what these things are. We turned, well, not we, white people in this country turned the history of colonization here into this righteous struggle for freedom, when it was really just another riot. I mean, can we just be honest? And okay, fine. They didn't want to pay taxes and give up slavery like the crown in Britain wanted the colonists to here, because slavery was already abolished in Britain. And instead of saying, okay, we're not going to do slavery anymore, and okay, fine, maybe we can negotiate the taxes or whatever, the colonists destroyed the war. They dressed up as Native Americans. They blamed one group of oppressed people for the destruction of British property in order to start a war with the British that the same white folks, or at least their descendants, celebrate every year on the 4th of July, while they are right now sitting in front of their television talking about, well, rioting and property damage is violence and that's not the way to do it. That's what y'all celebrate every year on the 4th of July. That's how you got your so-called freedom. So, you know, it's of course expected that those kinds of narratives will come from a deeply indoctrinated and miseducated populace, of being miseducated on a very white supremacist focused retelling of history. That's understandable, and people, I get that people are still very married to that because it's hard to let it go. But the truth is what it is, and you don't have to like it. A lot of people don't when we point this truth out, but it's still the truth. And these are the contradictions that we are contending with in this struggle. So what I think needs to happen as I wrap up, folks, is that white people need to contend with their history, the history of this nation that they continue to act as if is not a thing, that it's not soaked in violence and the blood of the, that those people were absolutely poor white folk. That's absolutely true. But we need to contend with that history. And if you are not going to join in the struggle for liberation with us, then get the fuck out of our way. I don't know another way to say that. I think we have we've gone past the point of pleasantries and niceties and cordiality. I know some people would like us not to be so raw, but like I said, we done sang, we done prayed, we done asked nicely, we've written letters, we've voted, we've begged, we've pleaded, we have cried on television, we have forgiven, we have forgiven a poison that was created by the people we are forgiving. We have forgiven much that it is killing hypertension and depression and chronic diseases that have made us even more susceptible to a virus. We're way past the point of pleasantries and niceties and asking nicely for our freedom and our justice from a system that is obvious is not going to give it to us. See, without a demand, and it never will. Frederick Douglass. So, folks, that's all I got to say for tonight. I'm sure I will probably have more to say later on in the week. Whatever you do, stay safe in regard to this coronavirus, and out in the streets, if you are out in the streets struggling with our brothers and sisters. Be good to each other. And as always, peace. Because right now, we finna have to fight for it.